Okay, everyone, welcome to the panel session. Panel session is entitled Building UK Technology Supply Chains, Opportunities and Challenges. We've got a lot of people to get through. So what I propose to do is to give everybody the chance on the panel to give a short introduction of their views on this topic, and then thereafter I'm going to open up for questions from the floor. So it gives you all time to think for a moment about what you want to address to the panel members, either generally or you can identify who you want to pose the question to. The first panel member I'll introduce is well known to most people here who've been around AESIN a little while, Paul Jarvie, the Driving Electric Revolution Industrialisation Centre lead, Southwest and Wales, is that correct? Based at the CSA Catapult in Newport. Paul's focus is on power electronics and magnetic materials, developing wide bandgap products using advanced packaging technologies. So, Paul, can I ask you the question, what are your views on the opportunities and challenges building UK technology supply chains?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I think with the global situation that we're facing at the moment, it's clear that having a sovereign or a local capability is crucial. I'm very biased towards electrification, so my sort of view is towards the opportunities in the power electronics in particular, and the packaging and the post-processing of those technologies. I think is something that we have a legacy and a strong capability in. I think it's something that with a more moderate amount of investment is something that we should be looking to build up, and a capability across power electronics and integration into machines and drives.
Thanks, Paul. So the next panel member is David Clark, Technology and Customer Relations Manager for Classic Wafer Fab. David's got a first-class honours degree in electrical and electronic engineering, as well as postgrad certificate in advanced silicon processing and manufacturing technologies, and has authored and co-authored more than 10 silicon carbide processing papers and several processing patents. So, same question to yourself, David.
Yeah, for great opportunities, I think, for the semiconductors part of the supply chain that I come from. Ourselves, we're seeing in silicon carbide a rapid increase in demand. It is absolutely taking off with electrification of vehicles, and I think that will be very similar with the requirement for increased sensor capability for autonomous vehicles as well. I think there's a great opportunity for the UK semiconductor supply chain. It's very strong in wide bandgap, and for the sensors and for power devices, I think there's a great opportunity. But there are challenges in supply chain. Incoming supply chain is a challenge for Classic. Energy costs, that's a big issue for manufacturers. The supply chain, so the human resources as well, accessing key skilled staff. And then the actual support from government, which is a bit fragmented. Those are some of the challenges.
Thank you, David. Next panel member is Alistair McGibbon, Head of Business Development at Compound Semiconductor Applications Catapult. Alistair's over 30 years experience in semiconductor and electronics, spending the last 15 years working across the UK supply chain to encourage collaboration and increase government awareness of the importance of power electronics, and as co-initiator of Power Electronics UK and co-author of Power Electronics UK's Green and White Paper. So, same question to you, Alistair. No. I think it's almost like musical microphones. Yeah. Paul, does yours work? So one of the challenges to the supply chain, microphones which work.
Can you hear me just talking like that? Yeah, okay.
Just shout.
Yeah, so I think the challenge is knowledge of what the UK capabilities are. So this room, the networks have been developed through NMI. We know in the UK power electronics is strong, sensors is strong, autonomy, networks are strong. But the issue is government doesn't necessarily understand what semiconductors or electronics is. And that's one of the challenges, is actually getting that across. And I think this year's helped a lot. So this is the first year for probably decades where there's government are thinking about what is semiconductors and what is the semiconductor industry. So there's a role here for everybody to actually get that message across for what it is, because at the start of the year, the government will be building a chip. No idea about silicon or non-silicon or different types of technology nodes, different types of electronics. So if we can start to articulate what the UK capability is in different parts of the electronic system, so the industry itself understands it, then you can have a better dialogue with government where the gaps and opportunities actually are. So that communication with government is really important, and there's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do that because the government is now listening. So I think that's an important challenge.
Thank you, Alistair. Our next panel member is Hadi Mustardzadeh, who is Head of Technology Trends at APC. Hadi's a chartered engineer and fellow IMechE with over 20 years background as an innovation and technology transfer specialist in both academia and industry. And as he tells me, he joined APC in August this year. So you've been now four weeks in post, so you know all the answers, I'm sure. Same question to yourself, Hadi.
Right. Oh. That's a good sign. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here and part of this panel. I would like us all to step back and think about this question on the screen a little bit more holistically, if you like. What is the role of supply chain in innovation success? When we talk about innovation success, in my mind, we always need to think about this, I always said it's a three-legged stool model. It's about technology and research and development, and technology development and innovation, but also building the underpinning supply chain to uptake the outcome of those technology across the whole ecosystem. And also the third leg of stool is always about the skills and workforce, how we prepare our workforce to utilize those technology innovation and research and development outcomes in the workplace, on the shop floor, on the ground. Thinking about the innovation, which is the common thinking in the government level at the moment, that yes, we have got a best research and development base in the UK, so we are fine, without thinking about the other two legs of the stool would lead to failure. So I think, yes, answering the question about the role of supply chain is quite important, and I'm going to pause here, and hopefully we will pick it up in the discussion.
Thanks, Hadi. While you guys work out which mic works, I'll quickly introduce Jake. Jake Clullow is the Head of Supply Chain and Procurement at McLaren Applied. His experience in developing global supply chains in various industries from medical, defence, motorsport and automotive, and responsible for supply chain strategy and delivery at McLaren. So over to you, Jake, same question.
Yeah, thank you for that. Looks like this works, that's good. I think for me, the key challenges that we face at the moment within supply chain has been the fact that we're still operating in a disrupted supply chain. So ultimately, what we're doing here now is that we're sort of in a market where it's so volatile that we don't know how to get out of it. And we keep hearing the same things of, it's going to fix itself by Q3 of next year, or fix itself by Q3 of next year, and it will stabilise. And it just clearly isn't, and we need to adapt to that, because we've been operating in a concentrated market of localising our, globalising our supply chains into certain geographic regions. And because of that, because of having strategies, supply chain strategies that have been cost driven, rather than actually looking at the resilience to what that needs to be and the generation of that towards this challenge that we face on the board now, how are we going to move forward with it? So for me, the key challenges that we face is looking at our supply chain strategies that we now have, working with great people like this in the room today, and turning that back into how do we actually change our strategies from being more cost driven to actually being more resilient focused and driving that forward into the future. And that is the opportunity that I think we need to take away from today, is that we need to collaborate together to bring that challenge forward.
Thank you, Jake. So we've heard initial views from the panel. Anybody who has questions, please wave your hand to Lauren, who has the roving mic. And Lauren, you've checked that works, haven't you?
I think so.
Perfect. So please wave to Lauren. Meanwhile, I'll use chair's privileges. There's one there, so I'll squeeze in a quick question before Andrew takes that. First question, David. So some headlines in the news: overseas government investments to subsidise sort of onshoring. US have signed a $52 billion CHIPS Act. Japan's providing $3.5 billion to TSMC. China, public and private sort of investments are over $200 billion. EU has signed a $46 billion CHIPS Act, and India is now entering with a $30 billion investment in chips industry. So what's the UK's, what do you think is or should be the investments that the UK should be making in this space?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something that's very difficult to compete against when there's so much funding for from overseas. I think one thing that was touched on earlier is the actual government support. Is rather fragmented because the semiconductor industry actually comes under the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which doesn't really seem to fit well. There's some cross-linking with BASE, which is the natural home, but then when we actually come to a conference like this, then the Department for Transport have interests as well, so it's all rather fragmented. So having one coherent natural owner to actually support it would actually be very helpful. And then I think after that then it needs to have a certain strategy, because pouring in money will not bring, for example, 5 nanometer technology back to the UK, and there are probably certain aspects of the industry where we're actually strong, and actually in the UK that money would be better targeted with better results. So I'm thinking, for example, where we're actually strong technically in the UK and academia and so on, and university spin-outs is in IP development and in new areas. So wide bandgap in particular seems to be an area where we're strong in the UK, and we have industries which are developing. So targeted funding towards wide bandgap in general, or else niche applications for existing silicon, for sensors, for power and so on. I think that'll be money well spent, and where we actually could compete as a nation, and it's certainly technologies that would support the automotive industry, and I think get that financial return that the government's looking for. So something to level the playing field, particularly for those industries, I think is something that could be supported.
Thank you, David. And Andrew, I think you were first to the mic.
No, that works. That works. You can hear me. Andrew Everett, ERA Foundation. Thanks for your responses to the first question. I've got a question. I understand the challenge of the commercialisation support requirements, the technology development R&D support, and clearly the skills to allow that to happen. What's different about this sector that makes it stand out? So every sector has the same challenges. Every sector talks about skills. Every sector talks about commercialisation. So what's different about this sector that can be a really compelling message to government that says, come and help us, as opposed to whoever else?
Alistair, would you like to pick up on that one?
I'd say that automotive is quite often the best lead sector for a lot of these technologies. So if you take power electronics, for example, by far, automotive is the driving sector for the implementation of wide bandgap solutions, and the same with sensing and communications. Automotive is a very good sector to start to do the initial driving of the technology, because there is volume there, and then from that then you can start to look at multi-sectoral solutions. And maybe a few years ago you might have said automotive is a bit too slow, perhaps, a bit risk adverse to sort of start to adopt new technologies, but I think that's changed massively in the last 5 and 10 years, because you've got companies like Tesla coming in, so the rate of change in automotive is now significant. So you can actually, if you can, and there is a UK existing supply chain there, so you've got immediate benefit from that, and then you can show that there's then benefit to then move across into other sectors as well, and you can across all the main areas: power management, net zero, autonomy. Automotive's a good place to start that. So I think that's compelling, and there's a strong automotive voice in the UK as well that government listens to as well. So it's best, that's a great place to actually start as an incubator for a lot of those new technologies and bring them through.
Thanks, Alistair.
Add one comment to that, and I think the other point is the automotive sector has a very widespread supply chain in the UK at the moment. Every company at every stage of the supply chain, tier 2, tier 3, can claim that they could play a role in that supply chain as a designer, as a service provider, as a solution provider for different aspects of a vehicle system. And this transfer of knowledge and know-how from automotive sector to other sectors, the spillover of that knowledge and technology development and deployment could be the leveraging point for this sector, as Alistair mentioned, to basically showcase the importance and highlight the significance that this sector can make for the whole of the UK economy.
Thanks, Hadi. Sorry.
Yeah, and maybe just, can you hear me?
Paul, hold fire, Paul, hold fire. I'll throw something else at you, don't worry. Yeah. Any further questions on the floor? While you're thinking about further questions and attracting Lauren's attention, I'd like to jump in chair's privileges, and sorry for cutting you off, Paul, but I'll come back to you in a second. Jake, we've talked earlier, or we've heard earlier, about software configured car and the change in development and the evolution that we're seeing in the automotive industry and how products are developed and the attitudes towards product lifecycle management and things like that. It's difficult for regions like the UK to become self-sufficient. So, what are the kinds of approaches that we can take in places like the UK where we're not going to gain complete self-sufficiency in our supply chain? And you've got experience in that global perspective. What can we do here in the UK?
So I think firstly, with regards to that, what we need to be looking at is what I was mentioning earlier about that kind of investment in our integration with our systems. So finding that link between the demand signal of it and ultimately the supply for what's required. We need to integrate better and become more synchronized. So as being in the UK and a manufacturer here in the UK, I have to spend more of my time and effort making sure that I'm communicating with my supply chain out globally to ensure that that visibility is there. Because ultimately the investment can't be let's create a fab in the UK, let's do this, let's make that here. It's just not possible. Some of the cost regions that we've got now and the cost, how competitive it is, you're not going to secure it. And you can't just go to companies and leverage, I've got greater volume, got greater this. You need to work better with them, give them greater synchronization of your demand and what is coming through the pipeline. So I think in terms of the challenge of what we need to invest in within the UK, in terms of some of that visibility, is more about our systems and integration that we're going to be working with and how you can bring that into play with some of those global suppliers. Because working on a 24-hour clock with these, real-time information is extremely important, and having that available to hand is extremely going to speed up the way that we can actually react to the market, react to that volatility, and actually turn around product much quicker in a way that we need it. We can't just keep stockpiling, we can't just keep seeing surges in demand and just think, oh, that will fix the problem, that's just going to solve it. It's just going to keep reacting, and essentially we're just going to be in this mitigation process constantly without ever actually solving the problem to its root. And that product lifecycle management might change around where you, instead of just doing big product life cycles and new iterations and new versions, you might have to review that and actually look at doing smaller little iterations, more frequent, more often, and actually through that being able to then implement things a lot quicker and a lot smoother through the supply chain.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks. Paul, I cut you off earlier, so I think it's only fair that as we kind of come up to the end of time, I give you the last question. So I want to raise the topic of automation, connectivity and automation, which is obviously looming very large on the landscape for all of us. Some of the recent analysis that the Automotive Council has done and Zenzik have been involved with has looked at bill of materials for CAV developers, and it's identified that more than 50% of total vehicle components are available in the UK, but the actual autonomy pieces, sensors and the likes, and the connectivity pieces, less than 10% are available in the UK supply chain. So what can the UK do? You were touching before, I think you wanted to answer something related to this. What can the UK do to prepare for the CAV market? It's estimated to be in 2030 of the order of $2 trillion a market. What can the UK do to be preparing for that?
That's not the question I wanted, but I'll have a go. No, I was actually going to add just one.
It's not scripted. So.
I was going to add one part. I think our heritage in motorsport and the sort of excellence that comes through in the engineering there that we use to drive, McLaren, Williams, companies that are in the room today, I think is another big factor to Andrew's point on why bother, why automotive. So I think that does push the envelope on both the powertrain and CAV related stuff, high-speed data transfer. I think Alistair touched on this. I think in terms of the bill of materials, a big part of, I think, what was coming through on the education in terms of semiconductors generally was that in some cases you need very high-speed processing or very high-end. A lot of other times, and it's seen with sensors, with compound semiconductors and new materials and novel packaging and integration, can bring the solutions. LiDAR's a big one in the news. But I think that part of it, where we can innovate without having to go to the extreme sub-5 nano, is a big part of what we can look to invest into with the existing semiconductor industry. We have the 20-plus fabs that are still running in the UK. I think the design part that goes with that is something that's a strength, and we can build on that.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, I'm being flashed at down at the bottom here, telling me time's up, and I'm conscious that next up is lunch, so I'm going to stop. Can we all thank the panel members and continue discussion after?